Lightning splits the stormy Houston sky as Marcus Reynolds, a black businessman in a crisp suit, steps from his private jet onto the jet bridge of Apex Airlines Flight 237. His tablet glows with confidence, but flight attendant Karen Holt blocks him, smirking. Economy's that way, and snatches his first-class pass. Thunder roars as she shoves him off the plane, clueless he owns Apex. Her smug grin lingers, but what chaos will her mistake unleash? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more epic showdowns. Rain slammed against the jet bridge windows, turning the Houston night into a blurry mess of gray and black as Marcus Reynolds stood firm, his polished shoes planted on the rubberized floor. The storm outside mirrored the brewing chaos within, each clap of thunder punctuating the sharp sting of Karen Holt's earlier shove. Her blonde ponytail bobbed as she strutted ahead, arms crossed, her Apex Airlines badge glinting under the fluorescent lights like a tiny shield of authority. She'd ripped his boarding pass from his hand minutes ago, her lips curling into a sneer as she'd barked, "Economy's that way." And now she was leading him back to the terminal, oblivious to the fire she'd just ignited. Marcus adjusted, his tie, his face a mask of calm, though his dark eyes burned with a quiet fury. He'd flown Apex countless times, owned it for 3 years, yet here he was, reduced to a trespasser in his own kingdom. Passengers crowded the gate area beyond the jet bridge's mouth, their faces a mix of exhaustion and curiosity, some clutching coffee cups, others scrolling phones, all delayed by the storm. A few glanced up as Marcus emerged behind Karen, his 6-foot frame cutting an imposing silhouette against the flickering lights. She spun on her heel, planting herself between him and the gate agent's desk, her voice clipped and loud enough to carry. "This guy thinks he's slick with a fake first-class pass. I'm not letting him back on until we sort this out." Her words dripped with accusation, her pale blue eyes narrowing as if daring him to argue. The crowd stirred, a murmur rippling. Through them, some nodding like they'd expected nothing less from a man like him, others whispering behind cupped hands. Marcus felt the weight of their stares, the familiar sting of assumption sinking into his skin like 1,000 tiny needles. He slid his tablet from his suit pocket, fingers moving with deliberate grace as he pulled up a digital spare of his boarding pass. The screen glowed bright, Apex's logo stark against the white background, his name in bold, Marcus Reynolds, Seat 1A, First Class. He held it out, his voice steady as steel. "Check it. I belong there." Karen's smirk faltered for a split second, but she snatched the tablet anyway, her manicured nails clicking against the glass. She squinted at the screen, her brows knitting together as if she could will the document into a lie. "This doesn't mean anything," she snapped, thrusting it back at him. "Anyone can fake a screenshot. I'm calling security." Her tone was final, a judge delivering a verdict, and Marcus saw it then. The unshakable certainty in her eyes, the kind that didn't need evidence because it had already decided who he was. Before he could respond, she yanked her radio from her belt, barking into it with a smug edge. "Gate 12, I need security now. Got a passenger with a forged pass trying to sneak into first class." The static crackled back, a gruff voice confirming, "On our way." Marcus exhaled slowly, his breath fogging briefly in the chilly jet bridge air. He'd faced this before, the quick leap from doubt to condemnation, the way skin color turned a boarding pass into a crime scene. But this time, it was his airline, his rules, and he wasn't about to let it slide. He slipped his phone from his pocket, thumbing a quick call as Karen smirked, thinking she'd already won. "They've started it," he said softly into the line, his voice low and measured. "Move forward." The person on the other end didn't hesitate, a crisp "understood" cutting through before the call dropped. Footsteps thudded down the jet bridge, heavy and purposeful, as 2 security guards rounded the corner. The first was a hulking man with a buzz cut, his badge reading Tanner, his hand resting on a baton like he was itching to use it. "This our co." Second, shorter but wiry, had a pinched face and eyes that darted between Marcus and Karen like he was sizing up a fight. "What's the problem?" Tanner growled, his stance wide, blocking Marcus's path back to the plane. Karen stepped forward, her chin jutting out. "This guy's got a fake first-class pass. I told him economy's his spot, but he won't listen. Get him out of here." Her words were a command, not a request, and Tanner nodded, cracking his knuckles as he advanced. Marcus held up a hand, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Before you touch me, check my ticket with your system. It's real." Tanner hesitated, his meaty fist hovering midair, while the wiry guard, Jenkins, pulled out a handheld scanner, glancing at Karen for approval. She rolled her eyes but didn't stop him, her confidence unshaken. Jenkins tapped the scanner against Marcus's tablet, the device beeping as it synced with Apex's database. The screen flashed green, Marcus's name and seat popping up in crisp letters, but Karen cut in before Jenkins could speak. "That's not proof. He could have hacked it." Her voice rose, sharp and desperate, clinging to her narrative like a lifeline. Tanner didn't wait for debate. He grabbed Marcus's arm, his grip iron tight, yanking him toward the terminal as Jenkins flanked his other side. The crowd parted, some gasping, others filming with shaky hands, the scene unfolding like a slow-motion car wreck. Marcus didn't resist. His posture relaxed even as Tanner's fingers dug into his bicep, leaving bruises beneath the suit. He'd learned long ago that fighting back too soon gave them the excuse they craved, the chance to twist a black man's defiance into a threat. Instead, he let them drag him, his mind racing 3 steps ahead. The gate agent, a young woman with wide eyes, watched from behind the desk, her fingers frozen over the keyboard, as if unsure whether to intervene. Halfway across the gate area, Tanner shoved Marcus against a pillar, the cold metal biting into his back. "Stay put," he barked, stepping back as Jenkins hovered nearby, radio crackling with updates from the plane. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mix of "what's he done" and typical, their assumptions filling the air like smoke. Marcus straightened, brushing off his jacket, his calm unshaken even as Karen strutted over, her smirk back in full force. "Told you," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You don't belong up there. Security's got this now." Her victory lap was palpable, her heels clicking against the tile as she turned to head back to the plane, certain she'd crushed him. But Tanner's radio buzzed, a voice cutting through the static with a nervous edge. Hold up. We've got a flag on this guy. Database says he's a VIP, Apex brass." Tanner's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to Marcus, who stood there, hands in his pockets, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Jenkins fumbled with the scanner again, double-checking, his face paling as the truth sank in. "He's legit," Jenkins muttered, barely audible, but Karen whirled around, her smirk vanishing. "What?" she snapped, storming back over. "That's impossible." Marcus met her gaze, his voice smooth as silk. "Check again if you want. I'll wait." Tanner hesitated, his hand twitching toward the baton, but Jenkins stepped between them, holding up the scanner. "It's him. Marcus Reynolds. First class is his seat." The crowd hushed, a collective intake of breath as the guards exchanged uneasy glances. Karen's face flushed red, her fists clenching at her sides. She'd been so sure, so certain he was a fraud, and now the ground was crumbling beneath her. "This is ridiculous," she spat, but her voice cracked, betraying the first flicker of doubt. Tanner loosened his grip, stepping back with a grumbled, "Sorry, man," though it sounded more like a curse than an apology. Jenkins nodded toward the jet bridge. "Let's get you back on." Marcus adjusted his cuffs, his smile widening just enough to sting. "Appreciate it," he said, his tone laced with irony as he started toward the plane. The crowd parted, again, this time with a mix of awe and confusion. Phones still rolling as they captured every second. Karen stood frozen, her authority slipping through her fingers like sand, but her eyes burned with something darker now, a promise of retaliation brewing behind them. Marcus paused at the jet bridge entrance, glancing back at her, his expression unreadable. He'd won this round, or so it seemed, but he knew her type, knew she wouldn't let it end here. She'd humiliated herself in front of dozens, and that kind of wound didn't heal quietly. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, the thunder outside roared louder, a warning of the storm still to come. Karen's radio crackled again, but she ignored it, her mind racing for a way to turn this back on him. Marcus boarded the plane, his seat waiting, but the victory felt hollow, a fleeting calm before the real fight began. What would she do next to claw her way back? The gate area at Houston's airport buzzed with restless energy, a chaotic stew of soaked travelers and flickering fluorescent lights casting jagged shadows across the tile. Rain lashed the floor-to-ceiling windows, each gust rattling the glass, like a fist pounding for entry, while delayed passengers sprawled across seats, their faces etched with frustration. Marcus Reynolds stepped back into this mess from the jet bridge, his suit still crisp despite the earlier scuffle, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with a predator's calm. Security guards Tanner and Jenkins flanked him, their postures stiff, with reluctant respect after confirming his VIP status in Apex Airline's system. The crowd hushed, phones poised like tiny spotlights, capturing his return as whispers snaked through the air. Hadn't they just dragged him out? Who was this guy to flip the script so fast? Karen Holt lingered near the gate desk, her arms crossed, tight, her blonde ponytail swaying as she glared at Marcus. The smugness she'd worn minutes ago had melted into something sour. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she watched him reclaim his ground. Tanner muttered another half-hearted, "Sorry, sir," his buzz-cut head dipping slightly, while Jenkins handed Marcus his tablet back, the screen still glowing with his first-class confirmation. "You're good to go," Jenkins said, his wiry frame shifting uneasily as if he sensed the storm wasn't over. Marcus nodded, slipping the tablet into his pocket, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Let's get this flight moving." The guards escorted him past Karen, her eyes boring, into his back, but he didn't flinch, his stride steady as he re-entered the jet bridge. Victory, right? Think again. The first-class cabin of Apex Flight 237 greeted Marcus with its plush leather seats and warm amber lighting, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Passengers already buckled in glanced up, some with curiosity, others with faint smirks, as he settled into seat 1A, the one Karen had tried to rip from him. He exhaled, leaning back, the faint scent of lavender from a folded blanket mixing with the jet fuel wafting through the air vents. For a moment, it felt like a win, the kind he'd fought for his whole life, proving he belonged where others assumed he didn't. But that peace shattered fast. Karen stormed down the aisle, her heels clicking like gunfire, her face a mask of barely contained rage. She'd lost the first round, and it showed in the way her hands trembled as she gripped her service tablet, her knuckles white against the plastic. She stopped at Marcus's row, her voice low but venomous. "You think you're clever, don't you? Slipping past security with that little trick?" Marcus met her gaze, unflinching, his fingers resting lightly on the armrest. "It's not a trick, it's my seat." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dangerous sparking behind them. She didn't respond, just spun on her heel and marched to the galley, disappearing behind the curtain. Marcus watched her go, his gut tightening. He'd seen that look before, the kind that didn't back down, the kind that doubled down. What? Was she cooking up now? Could one woman's pride really turn a flight into a battlefield? Minutes later, the plane's engines roared to life, the cabin vibrating as it taxied toward the runway. Marcus pulled out his phone, thumbing a quick text to his COO, Lena Carter, a woman who'd been his right hand since Apex's inception. "They're letting me back on, but it's not over. Phase 2. Her reply pinged back instantly. "Got it. We're ready." He pocketed the phone, his mind racing. Karen's retreat didn't mean surrender. It meant strategy. He'd just humiliated her in front of dozens, and people like her didn't swallow that quietly. The plane lifted off, slicing through the storm clouds, the turbulence jostling passengers as lightning flashed outside. Marcus stayed calm, but his instincts screamed trouble was brewing behind that curtain. In the galley, Karen hunched over, the cabin phone, her voice a hushed hiss as she dialed the captain. "Sir, we've got a problem in first class. That passenger, Marcus Reynolds, he threatened me when I questioned his ticket. Said he'd make me regret it." Her words were a lie spun with the ease of someone who'd done it before, her tone trembling just enough to sell the act. Captain Ellis, a grizzled veteran with a no-nonsense streak, grunted on the other end. "Threatened you? You sure?" Karen nodded, though he couldn't see it, her voice rising with fake urgency. "Yes, sir. He's unstable. I don't feel safe with him up there. Ellis paused, the silence heavy, then barked, "Fine. Lock him down. We'll sort it mid-flight." She hung up, a smirk tugging at her lips as she smoothed her uniform. Marcus might have won the gate, but she'd win the sky. Back in first class, Marcus sensed the shift before it hit. The plane leveled off, the seatbelt sign blinking off, and two crew members emerged from the galley, their faces tight with purpose. One was a lanky guy with a nervous tic. The other, a broad-shouldered woman with a clipboard clutched like a weapon. They stopped at his row, the woman speaking first, her voice clipped. "Sir, we need you to come with us. Captain's orders." Marcus arched an eyebrow, his pulse quickening but his expression stone cold. "For what?" The lanky guy shifted, avoiding his gaze. "Just come with us, please." Marcus unbuckled slowly, standing to his full height, towering over them as the cabin fell silent, every eye locked on the scene. They led him to a cramped crew closet near the galley, a 6x4 box of metal and plastic, the air stale with the tang of cleaning fluid. Karen waited there, her arms crossed, her smirk back in full force as they shoved him inside. "You're staying here until we land," she said, her voice dripping with triumph. "Captain says you're a risk." The door slammed shut, the lock clicking with a finality that echoed in the tight space. Marcus stood still, the hum of the engines vibrating through the walls, his suit jacket brushing against a mop handle. He'd been here before, figuratively, locked out by people who couldn't stand to see him rise. But this was literal, and it stung deeper than he'd admit. He pulled out his phone, the signal weak but enough, texting Lena again. "They've locked me up. Phase 2 now." Her reply flashed back, "On it. Hold tight." Marcus pocketed the device, his mind spinning. Karen had played her card, twisting his pushback into a threat, painting him as the angry black man she knew the captain would buy. It was textbook, the kind of lie that stuck because it fit the story they wanted to believe. But she'd miscalculated. Marcus wasn't just a passenger. He was the king of this castle, and he'd already set the wheels in motion to burn her throne to ash. Outside, a passenger in 3B, a wiry guy with a buzz cut and a cheap suit, pulled out his phone, his hands shaky as he hit record. The closet door was barely visible from his angle, but he caught Karen's smug strut back to first class, her voice carrying as she muttered, "That's where he belongs." He uploaded the clip to X, captioning it, "Apex Airlines locking up a first-class passenger? What's going on?" Within minutes, the hashtag #SarkApexRacism sparked, likes and retweets piling up as the video spread like wildfire. Marcus didn't know it yet, trapped in his metal cage, but the world was starting to see. Hey folks, what do you think? Comment number 1 if you're raging at Karen's dirty move, or number 2 if you think Marcus should have fought harder at the gate. Drop a like if you're rooting for justice to hit her like a freight train, and subscribe to catch how this explodes next. Ever wonder how far someone's pride can push them before they crash? So, what's Karen got up her sleeve now that she's locked Marcus away? Will her lie hold, or is something bigger about to rip this flight apart? Stick around to find out. The crew closet aboard Apex Flight 237 was a coffin of steel and shadows, its walls pressing in on Marcus Reynolds like a vice. At 30,000 feet, the air was thin and sour, laced with the bite of bleach and the faint rumble of engines, vibrating through the floor. Marcus stood wedged between a mop bucket and a stack of plastic trays, his broad shoulders brushing the cold metal, his suit jacket snagging on a jagged bolt. The lock Karen Holt had snapped shut still echoed in his ears, her smug, "That's where he belongs," lingering like a taunt. He flexed his hands, the bruises from Tanner's grip pulsing beneath his cuffs, but his face stayed carved from stone, his mind a whirlwind of calculated fury. Outside, the plane sliced through storm clouds, the cabin lights flickering as turbulence rocked the fuselage. Marcus could hear muffled voices through the door, Karen's sharp tones cutting above the rest, rallying the crew like a general in her own twisted war. "He's trouble," she hissed, her voice carrying through the thin partition. "Said he'd sue us all, got aggressive when I called him out. We can't let him back out there." Her lies were bolder now, piling onto the threat she'd sold. To the captain, each word a brick in the wall she was building to bury him. The lanky crew member from earlier muttered something, too soft to catch, but the broad-shouldered woman with the clipboard snapped, "Just keep him locked up. Captain's orders." Marcus's jaw tightened. She'd turned the crew into her pawns, and he was the target. He shifted, his foot nudging the mop bucket, the slosh of dirty water a grim reminder of how low she'd dragged him. 30 minutes ago, he'd been in first class reclaiming his seat after proving his worth. Now, shoved into a closet like cargo, all because Karen couldn't stomach losing. He knew this game, had played it 100 times in boardrooms and backstreets, where his skin made him a threat before he even spoke. But this was his airline, his empire, and she'd just lit a match under it. How long could she keep this up before the flames caught her too? A sudden thud jolted the door, heavy and deliberate, rattling the hinges. Marcus tensed, his eyes narrowing as a gruff voice bellowed through the metal. "Hey, you in there. Think. You're some big shot, huh?" The accent was thick, southern, laced with venom. Another thud, harder this time, and the door bowed inward. "I know your type, boy. Stirring trouble where you don't belong." Marcus recognized the voice instantly. Greg, a hulking ex-cop turned crew member he'd clocked earlier in the galley, all muscle and menace. Greg's fist pounded again, the sound a drumbeat of raw hate, each strike shaking loose bits of dust from the ceiling. "Open this door and I'll show you where you really fit." Marcus didn't flinch, his pulse steady even as Greg's slurs grew uglier. Words he'd heard since he was a kid in Atlanta, clawing his way up from nothing. He'd built Apex to escape that noise, to own the skies where no one could box him in. Yet here it was, 30,000 feet high, slamming against his cage. Greg's boots scuffed the floor outside, pacing like a caged bull, his breathing loud and ragged. "Karen's right about you. Should have tossed you off in Houston." The plane lurched, turbulence tossing Greg against the wall with a grunt, but he recovered, banging again, harder, the door creaking under the strain. Marcus stayed silent, letting the man exhaust himself, knowing every word was fuel for what came next. He slid his tablet from his pocket, the screen's faint glow, cutting through the dimness. The signal was spotty, the plane's Wi-Fi flickering like a dying bulb, but he tapped into it anyway, his fingers moving with surgical precision. Years of outsmarting rivals had honed this skill, turning tech into a weapon. He bypassed the crews, firewall in seconds, a smirk tugging at his lips as he opened a secure line to Lena, his COO. "They're escalating," he typed, his message short and sharp. "Greg's losing it out there, leak it." Her reply pinged back fast. "Done. It's hitting now." Marcus pocketed the tablet, leaning against the wall as Greg's fist slammed again, the metal groaning. Time to turn the tables. Beyond. The closet. Karen stood in the galley, her arms crossed as she watched Greg's tantrum with a flicker of approval. She'd handpicked him after locking Marcus up, knowing his short fuse and shorter tolerance would keep her prisoner in line. The lanky crew member hovered nearby, fidgeting with a coffee pot, his eyes darting to the closet door. "Shouldn't we calm him down?" he mumbled. But Karen shot him a look that could shatter glass. "Let him vent. Keeps that guy in check." She didn't care about the noise, didn't care that passengers could hear Greg's bellowing through the thin walls. To her, Marcus was a problem to crush, not a person, and Greg was her hammer. But the hammer was about to hit something else. Back in first class, the wiry passenger in 3B, the one who'd filmed Marcus's lockup, refreshed his phone, his jaw dropping as notifications flooded in. His shaky video, uploaded 30 minutes ago, had blown up, retweets climbing into the thousands. Clark Apex racism trending nationwide. Comments poured in, furious and fast. "This is disgusting. Boycott Apex. Who's that guy they locked up?" He tapped record again, panning to the galley where Greg's shouts echoed, catching Karen's silhouette as she egged him on. "They're still at it," he whispered into the mic, uploading it live. The clip hit the internet like a Molotov cocktail, shares spiking as the plane soared oblivious above the chaos below. At Apex headquarters in Dallas, Lena Carter sat in her corner office, her laptop screen a mosaic of X posts and news alerts. The stock ticker in the corner blinked red, Apex's shares dipping 5%, then 7, then 10 in a matter of minutes. She'd leaked Marcus's message to a trusted journalist the second he'd texted, framing it as a whistleblower tip. Apex Airlines locks up VIP over flight attendant's bias. The story was everywhere now. CNN picking it up. Bloomberg running a ticker. The internet ablaze with outrage. Lena smirked, dialing her team. Push it harder. Crash their PR before they land. The stock plummeted further, investors panic selling as the hashtag burned brighter. Back in the closet, Marcus felt the plane tilt, another wave of turbulence shaking the walls. Greg's pounding stopped, replaced by a string of curses as he stumbled, his bulk crashing into something outside with a loud clang. Marcus slid down to sit, his back against the door, the cold seeping through his suit. He didn't know the video was out there, didn't know Apex's empire was trembling, but he felt the shift, the way the air thickened with something bigger than Karen's spite. She'd locked him up, sure, but she'd just handed him a megaphone he didn't even need to hold. Greg's voice flared again, closer now, his breath hot against the door's seam. "You're done, you hear me? Done!" Another thud, weaker, this time, the man's energy fading but his hate still sharp. Marcus closed his eyes, picturing the boardroom he'd built, the airline he'd forged from scratch. Karen and Greg thought they'd won, thought they'd stuffed him into a box. He couldn't escape. They didn't know he'd already slipped the lock, that the world was watching, that their little victory was about to cost them everything. The plane steadied, the storm outside easing, but inside, the real tempest was just beginning. The first-class cabin of Apex Flight 237 glowed with a soft, deceptive calm, its amber lights casting long shadows across the leather seats as the plane cruised at 30,000 feet. Passengers sipped drinks or scrolled phones, their faces, a mix of boredom and unease, the echoes of Greg's earlier outburst still lingering in the recycled air. Marcus Reynolds stepped out of the crew closet, his suit wrinkled but his posture unbroken, the faint hum of engines underscoring his return. Captain Ellis, a wiry man with gray streaks in his hair, stood waiting, his hands clasped behind his back, his weathered face tight with regret. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, voice gruff but low. "I got word from HQ, you're cleared. My apologies for this mess." Marcus nodded, his dark eyes sharp, hiding the ache in his bruised arms. "Let's just get on with the flight," he replied, smooth as ever, though his mind churned with what came next. He settled back into seat 1A, the leather creaking under his weight, the faint scent of lavender from the blanket now sour with the memory of confinement. Passengers glanced his way, some whispering, others pretending not to notice, their phones buzzing with notifications they didn't yet understand. Marcus pulled out his tablet, its screen flickering to life as a flood of messages from Lena hit. "Leaks live. Stock's down 10%. Proof's out. You're the majority shareholder. They're scrambling." His lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. Apex's board had seen the firestorm online, the video of him locked up, Karen's smug strut, Greg's slurs, all of it blowing up under War Apex racism. They'd caved fast, ordering his release to stop the bleeding. But Karen wasn't done bleeding him yet. She emerged from the galley minutes later, her blonde ponytail tight, her blue eyes blazing with a fury that hadn't dimmed. She'd heard the captain's orders over the radio, knew Marcus was back in his seat, and it burned her like acid. He'd slipped her grip again, turned her win into ash, and now the crew avoided her gaze, their loyalty fraying. She gripped, a tray of coffee, her knuckles white, her steps deliberate as she approached his row. "Coffee, sir?" she asked, her voice syrupy with false sweetness, a mask so thin it cracked at the edges. Marcus looked up, meeting her stare, his instinct screaming trap. "Sure," he said, keeping it neutral, watching her hands as she poured. The coffee splashed deliberately, a scalding arc hitting his lap, soaking through his suit pants with a hiss. He flinched, the heat searing his thighs. But Karen didn't stop there. She stumbled, her tray tilting, and a faint clink betrayed her real move. Marcus shifted just in time as she sat the tray down, but his fingers brushed the cushion, catching the sharp bite of glass shards she'd hidden beneath the blanket. Pain lanced through his hand, blood welling up in thin red lines as he pulled back, the cuts shallow but deliberate. Karen stepped back, her smirk flickering, a predator savoring the hit. "Oh, sorry," she said, her tone mocking. Must have been an accident. The lie was flimsy, but her eyes dared him to call it out. Blood dripped onto the armrest, stark against the beige leather, and Marcus clenched his jaw, the sting in his hand matching the fire in his chest. She'd gone physical now, her spite spilling over into violence, all because he dared to reclaim what was his. He'd seen this before, the way entitlement turned petty slights into weapons, the way people like her assumed he'd fold under, the pain. But he didn't. He wiped his hand on a napkin, the red staining the white, and met her gaze with a grin that chilled her smugness. "You're done," he said, his voice low, a promise wrapped in velvet. Karen's smirk faltered, her breath catching, but she turned away, retreating to the galley with her tray, thinking she'd still won this round. Across the aisle, a woman in 2C, mid-40s with a sleek bob and a lawyer's piercing stare, watched the whole thing unfold. Her name was Claire Henshaw, a civil rights attorney who'd clocked Marcus's ordeal from the gate to now. She'd seen the coffee, the glass, the blood, and her fingers tightened around her phone, already recording. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, others staring at their trays like they could unsee it. Claire leaned forward, her voice steady but urgent. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm a lawyer. That was assault. I can sue Apex for you, right? Here. Right now." She tapped her screen, going live on X, her feed lighting up with viewers as she narrated. Flight 237, Apex Airlines, witnessing a passenger attacked by crew. "Who's with me?" Marcus glanced at her, his mind racing. The cuts throbbed, the coffee burn stinging, but Claire's move was gold. "Appreciate it," he said, nodding slightly, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Let's see where this goes." Her live stream exploded, comments flooding in. Apex racism spiking again as viewers tagged news outlets, the clips spreading like wildfire. The cabin buzzed, passengers pulling out phones, some filming Karen as she hovered near the galley, oblivious to the digital noose tightening around her. Marcus wiped more blood from his hand, the napkin now a crumpled mess, and leaned back, letting the storm build. He'd turned her attack into his ammunition, and she didn't even know it yet. In the galley, Karen slammed the tray down, her hands shaking with a mix of rage and triumph. She'd hurt him, marked him, and that felt like a win, a way to claw back the control he'd stolen. Greg lumbered in behind her, his beefy frame filling the doorway, his face still flushed from his closet tantrum. "You get him," he grunted, cracking his knuckles. Karen nodded, her smirk returning. "Coffee and glass, he's bleeding up there. Let's see him play big shot now." Greg chuckled, a low, ugly sound, but the lanky crew member lingered nearby, his eyes wide. "That's messed up," he muttered, backing away. But Karen ignored him, her focus locked on her revenge. Back at Apex HQ in Dallas, Lena Carter watched the stock ticker plummet further, now down 15%. The boardroom a hive of panic. She'd seen Claire's live stream pop up, Marcus's bloodied hand flashing across screens nationwide, and she knew this was the tipping point. She dialed her PR team, her voice razor sharp. "Push the shareholder proof harder. Flood every outlet. They need to know who he is before this spirals more." The team scrambled, releasing Apex's ownership records, Marcus's name in bold as majority shareholder. The story hitting wires as CNN ran a breaking news banner. Apex Airlines shareholder, assaulted by crew mid-flight. In first class, Marcus flexed his hand, the cuts clotting into thin scabs, the pain a dull throb now. Claire's live stream hummed beside him, her voice steady as she detailed Karen's attack, viewers climbing into the tens of thousands. He glanced at the galley, catching Karen's silhouette as she whispered to Greg, their heads bent together, like conspirators. She thought she'd broken him, thought the blood on his suit was her victory lap, but he'd turned it around, let the world see her for what she was. And now Apex's empire trembled under his quiet wrath. The plane droned on, the cabin lights flickering as another wave of turbulence hit. But Marcus stayed still, his grin widening. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, tight and clipped. "Folks, we're hitting some rough air, stay seated." Passengers grumbled, buckling up. But Marcus knew the real turbulence was in Dallas, where the board was likely screaming into phones, trying to contain the fallout. Karen's attack had given him leverage, Claire's stream had given him witnesses, and Lena's leak had given him power. He'd struck back without lifting a finger, but he knew her type. Knew she'd come harder now, her pride a beast that wouldn't die quietly. The blood on his napkin was just the start. What would she do when she realized the world was watching her fall? The Apex Airlines headquarters in Dallas loomed like a glass monolith against the night sky, its 32nd floor ablaze with light as executives swarmed the boardroom, their voices a cacophony of panic. Sweat beaded on foreheads, ties loosened, laptops slammed open, the air thick with the stench of coffee and fear. Outside, the city glittered oblivious, but inside, the stock ticker on the wall bled red. Apex's shares plummeting 15%, then 18%. Each dip a knife to the company's gut. Lena Carter stood at the head of the table, her sleek blazer unrumpled, her dark eyes cutting through the chaos like a laser. She'd just unleashed Marcus Reynolds' ownership proof to every major outlet, and now the world knew. The man locked, in a closet burned with coffee cut with glass, was Apex's majority shareholder. The board was drowning and she was the one holding the rope. Chairman Victor Grayson, a silver-haired relic with a permanent scowl, slammed his fist on the oak table, his jowls quivering. How did we not know he was on that flight? How did we let some flight attendant tank us like this? His voice boomed, but Lena didn't flinch, her reply icy. You didn't need to know. Marcus handles his business quietly, until someone forces his hand. Karen Holt did that. The room hushed, the name a curse now, as screens flickered with Claire Henshaw's livestream, Marcus's bloodied hand trending under Sykes' Apex racism. Grayson's face purpled, but before he could retort, an assistant burst in, breathless. She's been fired. Emails out. Karen's off the plane. Lena's lips twitched. Step 1 done. Aboard Flight 237, 30,000 feet above Texas. The first-class cabin hummed with tension. Passengers glued to phones as the hashtag burned brighter. Marcus sat in seat 1A, his hand bandaged with a napkin. The coffee stain on his pants a dark badge of Karen's spite. Claire Henshaw's livestream played on her device across the aisle, her voice steady as she narrated. This is what Apex lets happen. Assault in the sky. Marcus flexed his cut fingers, the pain a dull pulse, his mind on Lena's text. Board's folding. You're free. Karen's out. He smirked, leaning back, the leather creaking under him. Victory tasted sweet. But he knew Karen too well. She wouldn't go quietly, not after he'd stripped her crown in front of the world. In the galley, Karen hunched over a crew tablet, her fingers trembling as she swiped through emails, her blue eyes wide with fury. The message from HR glowed stark. Effective immediately, Karen Holt is terminated for misconduct. Exit the aircraft upon landing. Her breath hitched, a choked sound escaping her throat as the words sank in. Fired? After 7 years? After climbing from economy to first class? After bending this job to her will? She'd locked Marcus up, burned him, cut him, and now they were tossing her out like trash? No. She wouldn't let him win. She tapped furiously, intercepting the email's server ping with a trick she'd learned from a tech-savvy ex, deleting it from the system before it hit the captain's inbox. Her smirk returned, shaky, but sharp. They'd never know she'd seen it. She straightened, smoothing her uniform, her mind racing. Marcus was back in his seat, the crew whispering about the livestream, passengers filming her every move. She'd lost the board, lost her job, but she still had the plane, still had power here. She'd make him pay, make them all pay. She grabbed her phone, texting Greg, the ex-cop who'd pounded the closet door earlier. Meet me in economy. We're not done. His reply buzzed back. Hell yeah. Karen slipped the crew tablet into a drawer, her plan forming like a storm cloud, dark and unstoppable. Marcus thought he'd won. She'd show him chaos. Marcus felt the shift before he saw it. The plane droned on, the cabin lights steady, but a ripple of unease passed through first class. He glanced at Claire, her live stream still rolling. Her viewer count climbing past 50,000. She met his gaze, nodding slightly, a silent pact between them. He pulled out his phone, texting Lena. "Shut it down." Her reply was instant. "On it." In Dallas, Lena's team hit Apex's servers, crashing the company website with a flood of fake traffic, stranding thousands of passengers nationwide as booking systems froze. Airports from New York to LA erupted in chaos, Apex counters mobbed, the stock ticker flashing 20% down. Marcus didn't know the full scope yet, but he felt the tremor, the empire buckling under his command. Karen emerged from the galley, her stride purposeful as she headed to economy, her blonde ponytail swinging like a pendulum. Greg lumbered behind her, his beefy frame shoving past the lanky crew member, who shrank back, eyes wide. She stopped, mid-cabin, scanning the rows, her gaze landing on a red-faced man in a Stetson hat. His oil-stained boots sprawled across the aisle. Hank Grayson, Victor's cousin, a loudmouth oil tycoon who'd flown Apex for years. His wealth a shield he wielded like a club. Karen leaned in, her voice a conspirator's whisper. "That guy in first? He's a fraud. Got me fired with lies. You gonna let him ruin this airline?" Hank's eyes narrowed, his meaty hand clenching his whiskey glass. "Hell no," he growled, tossing the drink back. She moved fast, whispering to 4 others, a grizzled trucker, a prim woman with a cross necklace, a young guy in a frat hoodie, and a middle-aged exec with a comb-over. Each nodded, their faces hardening as Karen spun her tale. Marcus was a con, a troublemaker, a threat to their flight. Greg cracked his knuckles, egging them on, his slurs from earlier echoing in their ears. Within minutes, she'd forged a mob, 5 passengers ready to march on first class, their entitlement flaring like a lit fuse. Hank stood first, his Stetson casting a shadow as he bellowed, "Let's get that bastard out of here." The others rose, a ragged chorus of agreement, their steps thudding toward the front. In first class, Marcus sensed the rumble before he saw them, a low growl of voices swelling from economy. Claire's livestream caught it too, her camera panning as the mob breached the curtain, Hank leading with a swagger, Greg looming behind, Karen trailing with a smirk. Passengers gasped, some shrinking back, others filming, the cabin electric with dread. Marcus stayed seated, his bandaged hand resting on the armrest, his dark eyes locked on Hank as the tycoon stopped at his row, whiskey breath hot in the air. "You don't belong here," Hank snarled, his voice a bullhorn. "Time to go back where you came from." Marcus didn't move, his silence a blade, but he knew this was Karen's doing, her last desperate swing. "Hey, y'all, can you believe this?" Comment number 1 if you're screaming at Karen's nerve to start a mob after getting canned, or number 2 if you think Marcus should have seen this coming. Drop a like if you're on the edge of your seat watching this plane turn into a war zone, and subscribe to see how he fights back. Ever think one person's grudge could drag a whole airline down? So, how's Marcus gonna handle this pack of wolves Karen's unleashed? Will he outsmart them, or is this the hit that finally grounds him? Buckle up for the next twist. The first-class cabin of Apex Flight 237 crackled with raw tension, the air thick with the sour tang of whiskey and sweat as Karen Holt's makeshift mob stormed in from economy. Hank Grayson, the red-faced oil tycoon in his Stetson hat, led the charge, his boots stomping the carpet like a war drum, his beefy frame towering over seat 1A. Behind him, Greg, the ex-cop turned crew thug, flexed his meaty fists, his eyes glinting with the same hate he'd spewed at the closet door. The trucker, the prim woman with her cross necklace, the frat kid, and the exec with his comb-over fanned out, a ragged line of fury, their faces twisted with the entitlement Karen had stoked. Marcus Reynolds sat still, his bandaged hand resting. On the armrest, his dark eyes locked on Hank, calm as a storm's eye amid the chaos. Hank leaned in, his whiskey breath a hot blast across Marcus's face, his voice a low growl. "You think you can sit here, huh? Playing big shot? You don't belong, boy." The word hit like a slap, sharp and deliberate, the kind Marcus had heard since he was a kid hustling on Atlanta's streets. The trucker sneered, cracking his knuckles, while the prim woman clutched her necklace, muttering, "Should have stayed in his place." The frat kid snickered, filming on his phone, and the exec adjusted his tie, nodding like this was a boardroom vote. Karen hovered at the back, her blonde ponytail swaying, her smirk a thin razor of triumph. She'd lit this fuse, and now it was burning straight for Marcus. He didn't flinch, his voice cutting through the din like a blade. "You're on my plane. Back off." Hank's face purpled, his meaty hand shooting out, shoving Marcus's shoulder hard enough to rock him against the seat. "Prove it, liar," he bellowed, spit flecking the air. Passengers gasped, some shrinking into their seats, others filming, the cabin a pressure cooker ready to blow. Claire Henshaw, the lawyer in 2C, kept her live stream rolling, her voice steady but urgent. "They're attacking him now. Apex Airlines, Flight 237. Her feed spiked, viewers climbing past 70,000, comments raging as the mob closed in. Marcus moved fast, years of judo from his teenage days snapping into play. He twisted Hank's arm mid-shove, locking the wrist and flipping the tycoon forward, sending him crashing into the seat across the aisle with a grunt. The Stetson flew off, rolling under a tray table, and Hank's whiskey glass shattered on the floor, amber liquid pooling like blood. The trucker lunged next, a haymaker swinging for Marcus's jaw, but he ducked, driving an elbow into the man's gut, folding him over with a wheeze. The prim woman shrieked, "He's violent!" Her cross swinging as she backed off, while the frat kid kept filming, laughing like it was a bar fight. Greg charged then, a bull in a uniform, his bulk slamming Marcus back against the window, the glass shuddering under the impact. Pain flared in Marcus's ribs, the coffee burns on his thighs screaming as Greg pinned him, one meaty arm pressing his throat. "Got you now!" Greg snarled, his breath hot with tobacco, his free fist cocked for a blow. Marcus's vision blurred, the cuts on his hand throbbing as he gripped Greg's arm, twisting with all his strength. He broke the hold, shoving Greg back, but the exec grabbed his jacket, yanking him off balance. The mob swarmed, a tangle of fists and shouts, their hate a living thing, fed by Karen's lies and their own brittle pride. Claire's livestream caught every second, her camera shaking as she stood, yelling, "This is assault! Stop it!" Passengers murmured, some filming, others frozen, the cabin a battlefield 30,000 feet up. Marcus fought back, his judo, precise, disarming the exec with a wrist lock, shoving the frat kid into a seat. But Greg roared back, tackling him again, this time slamming him to the floor. Carpet burned Marcus's cheek, his bandaged hand scraping raw as Greg's knee dug into his spine. Hank staggered up, wiping blood from a split lip, bellowing, "Hold him down!" Karen stepped closer, her smirk widening, her voice a hiss over the chaos. "See? Told you he's trouble." Across the aisle, a teenage girl in 4A, wiry with braids and a hoodie, pulled out her phone, her hands trembling as she hit record. She'd watched Marcus's lockup, seen the coffee spill, the glass, and now this. Her livestream flickered on, her voice cracking but fierce. "They're beating him up! Apex Flight 237, this is insane!" She panned from Marcus, pinned under Greg, to Karen, gloating at the edge, the mob a blur of rage. Her feed exploded, hitting 50,000 views in minutes, then 100,000. Apex racism surging as retweets flooded X. Comments screamed outrage. "This is a hate crime." "Shut Apex down! Who's that guy?" In Dallas, Lena Carter's office was a war room, her team hunched over screens as the stock ticker flashed 25% down, Apex's empire crumbling in real time. The teenage girl's stream popped up beside Claire's, twin fires burning online, and Lena's phone buzzed with alerts. CNN, MSNBC, every outlet picking up the story. She dialed her PR lead, her voice steel. Push the shareholder angle harder, get his face everywhere. Within minutes, Marcus's photo, sharp in a suit, hit news feeds captioned, "Apex majority owner attacked by crew and passengers." The boardroom erupted, Grayson slamming the table again, his voice hoarse. "We're dead! Fix this!" Aboard the plane, Marcus grunted under Greg's weight, his ribs aching, his breath short. He twisted, slamming a heel into Greg's shin, breaking free as the ex-cop stumbled with a curse. He staggered up, blood trickling from a reopened cut on his hand, his suit torn at the shoulder. Hank swung again, a wild punch Marcus dodged, shoving the tycoon into the trucker, both crashing into a tray cart with a clatter. The prim woman shrieked, clutching her cross while the frat kid kept filming, his laughter gone, replaced by wide-eyed shock. Greg lunged once more, but Marcus sidestepped, letting him slam into the bulkhead, the thud echoing through the cabin. Karen watched, her smirk faltering as the mob faltered, their momentum cracking. Passengers were standing now, some yelling, "Enough!" Others filming, the tide shifting. Claire's voice rose on her stream, "This has to stop!" While the teenage girl's feed hit 1 million views, her shaky narration breaking hearts online, Marcus straightened, wiping blood from his lip, his dark eyes locking on Karen. "Your move," he said, his voice low, a challenge she couldn't ignore. She froze, her plan unraveling, but her hate burned brighter, a promise of more to come. On the ground, Apex hubs erupted, protesters swarming terminals in Houston, Dallas, Austin, signs flashing, "Justice for Marcus." "End Apex racism." The teenage girl's stream had lit the match. Claire's fanned the flames, and now cities burned with outrage. Lena watched the footage, her smirk growing as the stock hit 30% down. Apex's name a curse on every tongue. Marcus didn't know it yet, pinned in the sky. But he'd turned Karen's mob into his army, the world rising to his side. The plane droned on, 30 minutes from landing, the cabin a wreckage of spilled drinks and shattered trays. Marcus stood tall, his suit a mess, his body bruised, but his spirit unbroken. Hank panted, clutching his side. Greg rubbed his shin, the others shrank back, their fire dimming. Karen lingered at the curtain, her eyes darting, her mind racing for the next blow. She'd lost the mob, lost the crew's trust, but she wasn't done. Marcus met her gaze, his grin faint but lethal. He'd taken their best shot and stood taller. What could she possibly throw at him now? The galley of Apex Flight 237 was a narrow fortress of steel and shadows, its counters littered with coffee-stained trays and crumpled napkins, the air heavy with the tang of spilled whiskey and tension. Marcus Reynolds stood at its edge, his suit torn at the shoulder, blood crusting on his lip from the mob's assault minutes ago. His dark eyes burned with a quiet fury, but his posture softened deliberately as Greg, the hulking ex-cop, loomed over him, zip ties dangling from his meaty fist. Hank Grayson, the oil tycoon, panted nearby, his Stetson back on crooked, his red face glistening with sweat. Karen Holt lingered at the counter, her blonde ponytail frayed, her smirk twitching as she watched her pawns circle their prey. The first-class cabin beyond buzzed with whispers, passengers filming through the curtain, their phones a constellation of tiny lights. Greg stepped closer, his tobacco breath hot on Marcus's face, his voice a growl. "Hands out now. You're done fighting." The zip ties clicked in his grip, a promise of restraint, and Marcus raised his hands slowly, palms up, his expression unreadable. "All right," he said, his tone calm, almost resigned, a surrender that didn't match the steel in his spine. Greg grinned, a predator's triumph, and yanked Marcus's wrists together, the plastic biting into his skin, already raw from the glass cuts. Hank chuckled, wiping blood from his split lip, muttering, "Should have done this sooner." Karen's smirk widened, her blue eyes glinting with victory. She thought she'd broken him finally after the mob failed. Marcus let them lead him back into the galley, his steps measured, his head bowed just enough to sell the act. Passengers craned necks, Claire Henshaw's live stream still rolling in 2C, her voice tight. "They're tying him up now. This is insane." The teenage girl in 4A kept filming too, her feed hitting 2 million views, her shaky narration a plea. "Someone stop this." Marcus caught their eyes briefly, a flicker of assurance they didn't catch, his mind already 3 moves ahead. He'd taken their punches, flipped their mob, and now he'd play this card, let them think they'd won. Greg shoved him against the counter, the edge digging into his bruised ribs, and Karen stepped forward, her voice a hiss. "You're staying here till we land. No more tricks." But Marcus had one left. He'd palmed his tablet from his pocket. During the scuffle, sliding it into his waistband before Greg tied him, now with his hands bound in front, he shifted subtly, his fingers brushing the device. Years of tech savvy kicked in, his thumbs tapping blind as he synced it to the plane's intercom system, a hack he'd perfected during Apex's early days. Karen didn't notice, too busy gloating, but the lanky crew member hovering near the coffee pot did. his eyes widening as Marcus's screen glowed faintly. "What's he doing?" the kid mumbled, but Karen snapped, "Shut up!" Her focus, locked on her prize. The intercom crackled to life, a sudden burst of static slicing through the cabin, and then Karen's voice echoed, sharp and venomous, recorded from her closet rant hours ago. "He's trouble. Doesn't belong up there. Should have tossed him off in Houston." The words boomed, raw and unfiltered, followed by Greg's slurs. "Know your type, boy." Each syllable a hammer to the passengers' ears. Gasps rippled through first class, then economy, heads whipping toward the galley. Claire's live stream spiked, her camera panning to the speakers. "That's her. That's what she said." The teenage girl's feed erupted, comments screaming, "She's a racist. Apex is trash." Marcus stayed still, his face blank, but his heart pounded with grim satisfaction. He'd turned her own hate into a weapon, broadcast plane-wide. The cabin exploded, passengers standing, shouting, "Get her out! Arrest her!" A businessman in 5B slammed his tray table, yelling, "This is a disgrace," while a mother in economy clutched her kid, whispering, "She can't stay here." Karen froze, her smirk vanishing, her face draining to ash as her words looped. Again, the system glitching on Marcus's hack. Greg spun, his fist clenching, bellowing, "Shut it off!" But the lanky crew member fumbled with the controls, his hands shaking. "I can't," he yelped, the intercom blaring on. Hank staggered, back, his Stetson slipping, muttering, "What the hell?" As the mob's bravado crumbled, their leader exposed. Karen's shock snapped into rage, her eyes darting to Marcus, realizing he'd done this somehow, even bound. "You!" she shrieked, lunging for a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. She yanked it free, her arms trembling as she swung, it like a club, the red canister arcing toward Marcus's chest. He twisted, his zip-tied hands useless, and the metal slammed into his ribs with a sickening crunch, two cracking under the force. Pain exploded, white-hot, stealing his breath, and he doubled over, blood flecking his lips as he coughed. Greg grabbed her arm, growling, "Enough!" But she shook him off, her breath ragged, her hate a wildfire now. "He deserves it," she spat, the extinguisher clattering to the floor. Marcus slumped against the counter, his vision swimming. The pain a jagged pulse through his torso. His ribs screamed with every breath, but he forced himself upright, his dark eyes locking on Karen through the haze. "You're finished," he rasped, blood staining his teeth, his voice ablade despite the agony. Passengers surged toward the galley, their shouts a wall of sound. "Get her out! Call the captain!" Claire's stream hit 3 million views, her narration fierce. She just attacked him again. The teenage girl sobbed on her feed. "He's hurt bad." The outrage online boiling over into chaos on the ground. Captain Ellis burst from the cockpit, his gray hair wild, his face a storm of fury as the intercom finally cut off, the echoes of Karen's venom still ringing. "What's going on?" he barked, shoving past Hank, who shrank back, his bravado gone. The lanky crew member pointed at Karen, stammering, "She hit him with that," gesturing to the extinguisher rolling on the floor. Ellis's eyes widened, flicking to Marcus, slumped but alive, blood dripping from his mouth. "Jesus," he muttered, then grabbed his radio, his voice tight. "Austin Tower, this is Flight 237, requesting emergency landing. We've got a situation." The response crackled back, "Cleared. Runway's yours." The plane tilted, descending fast, the cabin shuddering as passengers buckled in, their faces a mix of fear and rage. Karen backed against the counter, her hands shaking, her smirk gone, replaced by a wild panic as the crew turned on her. Greg stepped away, his fists unclenching, muttering, "You're crazy." His loyalty snapping under the weight of her madness. Hank slunk back to economy, the mob dissolving, their fire doused by the broadcast and the blood on Marcus's suit. The lanky kid hovered near Ellis, whispering, "She lied about everything," his voice trembling but sure. Marcus coughed again, pain lancing through his chest, but he stayed upright, his zip-tied hands resting on the counter. The extinguisher lay at his feet, a dented testament to Karen's desperation. Her last swing to keep him down. He'd surrendered, let them bind him, and still turned it around. Her own words her noose, the passengers her judge. Austin loomed below, the plane dropping through the clouds, the emergency landing a ticking clock. Karen's eyes darted, her mind racing for an escape, but the cabin had turned, the world had turned, and Marcus's quiet grin promised more. He'd paid in blood, but she'd pay in ruin. The Austin Bergstrom Airport tarmac shimmered under the harsh glare of floodlights, the night air thick with humidity and the acrid bite of jet fuel as Apex Flight 237 screeched to a halt. The plane's engines whined down, their roar fading into a low hum, but the chaos aboard spilled out like a flood as the jet bridge locked into place. Marcus Reynolds stumbled onto the tarmac, his suit a shredded mess, blood crusted on his lip, his ribs throbbing from Karen Holt's extinguisher blow. Zip ties still cut into his wrists, his hands numb but clenched, his dark eyes blazing with a defiance that refused to break. Sirens wailed in the distance, red and blue lights pulsing as a dozen cops swarmed from patrol cars, their boots pounding the asphalt, radios crackling with orders. Karen emerged next, her blonde ponytail limp, her uniform stained with coffee splatter, her face a mask of panicked fury. Greg trailed behind, his beefy frame slouched, his earlier bravado drained as the reality of landing hit. Captain Ellis barked into his radio, "Get them separated," as passengers poured from the jet bridge, phones out, filming the wreckage of Flight 237. Claire Henshaw's live stream hummed, her voice sharp. "We're on the ground. He's hurt bad, but they're still after him." The teenage girl in 4A kept rolling too, her feed at 4 million views, sobbing, "They won't. Leave him alone." The tarmac became a stage, every move spotlighted for the world. Two cops, a stocky veteran named Ruiz and a wiry rookie, grabbed Karen first, their grips firm as they cuffed her wrists. "You're under arrest for assault," Ruiz grunted, his voice rough from years on the beat. She thrashed, her voice shrill, "This is a mistake. He attacked me." Her lies crumbled under the weight of a plane full of witnesses, but her eyes darted to Marcus, promising more venom. Greg went next, his hands up muttering, "I didn't do nothing," as cuffs clicked shut. The cops moved fast, but Marcus sensed the shift. A flicker of unease as a third officer, a lanky man with a buzz cut, eyed him too long, his hand resting on his holster. Hank Grayson swaggered out last, his Stetson tilted, his red face smug, despite the blood on his shirt. He slipped Ruiz a thick wad of cash, his whisper low but clear. "That guy's the real problem. Frame him for assaulting me. Make it stick." Ruiz hesitated, glancing at the bills, then pocketed them, his jaw tightening. He nodded to the lanky cop, who advanced on Marcus, yanking his bound arms hard enough to wrench his shoulder. "You're coming too," the cop snarled. "Assault on a passenger, let's go." Marcus staggered, pain flaring in his ribs, but he smirked, his voice steady despite the blood. "Check the footage. You're digging your own grave." The cop ignored him, shoving him toward a patrol car, the zip ties cutting deeper as blood trickled from his reopened hand cuts. Passengers shouted, "That's wrong! He's the victim!" Their phones capturing every second. Claire's stream spiked to 5 million, her narration fierce. "They're framing him now. Corrupt cops on Apex's dime." The teenage girl's feed surged, her voice breaking. "This isn't justice." Hank watched from the sidelines, his smirk widening, thinking his bribe had sealed Marcus's fate. Karen, cuffed nearby, caught, his eye, a flicker of grim satisfaction passing between them. They'd lost the plane, but they'd hit him on the ground. Marcus hit the patrol car's side, his cheek pressed to the warm metal, his breath shallow as pain racked his body. The lanky cop leaned in, whispering, "You should have stayed quiet, pal," his tone dripping with contempt. Marcus didn't flinch, his mind racing. He'd survived the mob, turned Karen's hate against her. And now this. A rigged arrest, Hank's money greasing the wheels, the system bending to bury him again. He'd seen it before, in boardrooms and back alleys, the way wealth and skin, color twisted justice into a noose. But he wasn't done, not yet. Headlights cut through the night as a black SUV screeched onto the tarmac, tires smoking as it skidded to a stop. Lena Carter leapt out, her blazer sharp, her dark hair pulled tight, flanked by Apex's legal team, 3 suits with briefcases and stone-cold stares. "Let him go!" she shouted, her voice a whip crack over the sirens. She thrust a tablet at Ruiz, its screen glowing with ownership docs. Marcus's name bold as Apex's majority shareholder. "He owns this airline. You're arresting the wrong guy." Ruiz froze, the cash burning in his pocket, but the lanky cop tightened his grip, sneering, "Don't care who he is, he's mine." The board in Dallas, watching via hacked feeds, panicked as Lena's move hit. Grayson's phone buzzed, an email flashing. Hank Grayson terminated from Apex contracts, effective now. His cousin Victor had cut him loose, the stock at 35% down, the company bleeding out. Hank's face fell, his bribe useless as the legal team swarmed, pulling Marcus free. "This isn't over," Hank growled, backing off, his eyes promising revenge. The cops hesitated, Ruiz stepping back, but the lanky one muttered into his radio, "Get the judge ready," his plan shifting to a deeper trap. Beyond the tarmac, the terminal erupted, glass doors banging open as protesters stormed out, hundreds strong, their signs flashing. "Free Marcus! End Apex corruption!" The teenage girl's stream had sparked it, Claire's fanned it, and now Austin burned with fury. Chants shook the night. "Justice now!" as phones lit up, live feeds spreading to Houston, Dallas, beyond. Marcus straightened, blood dripping from his lip, his smirk faint but lethal as Lena cut his zip ties, the plastic snapping free. "You good?" she asked, her voice low. "Better now," he rasped, his ribs screaming, but his spirit unbroken. Karen watched from the patrol car, her cuffs rattling, her face twisting as the crowd roared. Hank slunk toward a cab, his Stetson low, but his mind churned, plotting his next hit. The lanky cop radioed again, his voice hushed. "He's loose, but we'll get him downtown." Marcus didn't hear it, but he felt it, the noose tightening even as the protesters cheered. He'd turned the plane, turned the tarmac, but Hank's money and Karen's hate weren't dead yet. The night pulsed with chaos, the world watching, and Marcus stood tall, battered but unbowed, ready for the next blow. "Okay, folks, what's your take? Comment number 1 if you're cheering Marcus beating the odds, or number 2 if you think Hank's bribe should have stuck. Hit that like if you're raging at this crooked cop twist, and subscribe to see how far this fight goes. Ever wonder how deep corruption runs when power's on the line? So, what's Hank cooking up now that he's cut loose? Can Marcus dodge this legal trap, or will the ground finally swallow him whole? Stay tuned for the next showdown. The Austin precinct was a concrete bunker, its flickering fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped flies, the air stale with sweat and cheap coffee. Marcus Reynolds sat in a filthy cell, his torn suit clinging to his bruised frame, blood crusting on his lip from the tarmac scuffle. His ribs ached with every shallow breath, the extinguisher's blow a throbbing memory, his wrists raw from the zip ties Lena had cut free. The cell's bars loomed cold and unyielding, graffiti scratched into, the walls whispering tales of forgotten fights. Outside, Hank Grayson paced free on bail, his Stetson tilted low, his red face smug as he slipped into a cab, his bribe still working its poison. Marcus leaned against the grimy bench, his dark eyes sharp despite the pain, his mind a steel trap, waiting to spring. Hours earlier, Hank had moved fast, his oil money greasing darker wheels. He'd tipped off a contact at the airport, a baggage handler with a rap sheet, to plant a baggie of cocaine in Marcus's impounded luggage from the private jet. The call went straight to Judge Harlan Tate, a wiry old bigot with a reputation for locking up black men on flimsy evidence, his robes a shield for his hate. Hank's voice had been low, urgent. "Frame him good, Harlan. Assault's not enough. Drugs'll bury him." Tate had smirked over the line. 10 years minimum. Done. The lanky cop from the tarmac, Officer Briggs, had grinned as he hauled Marcus in, the setup locked tight before Lena's legal team could blink. Now, in the precinct's holding area, Marcus sat cuffed again, this time to a metal ring on the bench, his hands numb, but his pulse steady. Briggs strutted past, his buzz cut glinting under the lights, his voice a sneer. "Found something in your bag, hotshot. Coke. You're going down hard." Marcus met his gaze, unflinching, his voice calm despite the blood on his teeth. "You planted it. Won't stick. Briggs laughed, a harsh bark leaning close. Judge Tate says otherwise. Enjoys solitary. He slammed the cell door, the clang echoing as Marcus's fate seemed sealed, the system bending once more to crush him. The bail hearing came fast, a sham in a cramped courtroom down the hall, the clock ticking past midnight. Judge Tate perched, on the bench, his gaunt face twisted with disdain, his gavel a weapon he wielded with glee. Marcus stood, uncuffed now but flanked by Briggs, his suit a wreck, his ribs screaming as he straightened. Lena sat in the gallery, her legal team scribbling notes, their faces tight with fury. Tate didn't look at them, his eyes locked on Marcus, his voice a rasp. Marcus Reynolds, charged with possession with intent to distribute, bail denied, remanded to custody. The gavel cracked, a gunshot in the silence, and Lena surged to her feet, shouting, "This is a setup. We've got proof." Tate ignored her, nodding to Briggs, who yanked Marcus back toward the cells, his grip bruising. Lena's team had uncovered Hank's bribe to Ruiz, the cash trail clear, but Tate waved it off, his ruling iron. "No evidence presented," he snapped, his lie bold as brass. Marcus stumbled, pain flaring, but his smirk flickered, a quiet promise he wasn't broken. The gallery erupted, reporters scribbling, phones buzzing as the story hit X. Apex owner framed by judge. Claire Henshaw's live stream still rolling. From a feed outside spiked to 6 million, her voice fierce. "They're railroading him." The teenage girl's stream echoed it, tears streaking her face. "He's innocent." Back in the cell block, Briggs shoved Marcus into solitary, a 6x8 tomb of concrete and despair, the door slamming shut with a hollow boom. Darkness swallowed him, the only light a thin sliver from a high-slit window, the air cold and damp. His ribs pulsed, his hand cuts reopened, blood smearing the wall as he slid down to sit, his breath ragged but his mind racing. 10 years? Hank's setup was tight, Tate's bias tighter. The drugs a lie he couldn't shake without evidence. He'd survived the plane, the mob, the tarmac. But this? This was the system's deepest cut, racial injustice carved into every bar. In Dallas, Lena's war room burned with activity, her team hacking flight logs, pulling security footage, chasing the baggage handler's trail. She'd traced Hank's call to Tate, the audio grainy but damning, and sent it to Claire, who blasted it online. Oil tycoon bribes judge to frame Apex owner. The stock ticker flashed 40% down. Apex's empire a husk as protests swelled outside terminals nationwide. Lena paced, her heels clicking, her voice steel as she dialed Marcus's burner, praying it reached him. "We've got Hank's call. We're coming for you." No reply, the signal dead in solitary's depths, but she wouldn't stop. Hours ticked by, the cell's silence a weight on Marcus's chest, his body battered but his spirit unbowed. Footsteps echoed suddenly, heavy and deliberate, a guard's shadow falling across the slit window. The door creaked open, revealing a burly man in uniform, his face lined with years, his eyes wary but not cruel. "Reynolds," he said, voice low. "I'm Vickers, worked Apex Security 5 years. I know who you are." Marcus straightened, wincing, his gaze piercing. "Then why am I here?" Vickers glanced back, then slipped a burner phone through the bars, his whisper urgent. "Heard the judge's call. Hank's dirty. I've got logs, tapes. Use this." Marcus took the phone, its weight a lifeline in his bloodied hand, his smirk returning despite the pain. Vickers was a whistleblower, an inside man, a crack in the wall Hank and Tate had built. He'd survived Karen's mob, turned her hate against her. And now this? A guard flipping the script, handing him the key to fight back. He powered it on, the screen glowing faint, texting Lena. "Got a source. Push harder." Her reply pinged back. "On it. Hang tight." The guard stepped back, nodding once, then vanished, leaving Marcus alone with the phone, the cell's darkness no match for the fire in his gut. Outside, Hank sat in a dive bar across town, his Stetson on the table, a whiskey in hand, his phone buzzing with Victor's furious texts. "You're cut off. Fix this or you're done." He smirked, dialing Tate, his voice slurred but sharp. "Double down. Lock him up tighter. I'll pay more." Tate rasped back. "Solitary's just the start. He's gone." They didn't know Vickers had turned, Didn't know Marcus held a weapon now, didn't know the world was closing in. The cell was cold, the pain brutal. But Marcus gripped the burner, his ribs cracking with every move, his resolve iron. He'd hit rock bottom, but the climb was coming. Solitary confinement in the Austin precinct was a suffocating abyss, its concrete walls slick with damp, the air heavy with mildew and despair. Marcus Reynolds slumped against the bench, his torn suit a blood-streaked rag, his ribs screaming. From Karen's extinguisher blow, his lip crusted with dried blood. The burner phone from Vickers glowed faintly in his hand, a lifeline in the dark. Its screen casting shadows across his bruised face. His wrists, raw from zip ties and cuffs, trembled as he typed to Lena, his COO. "Hack the grid. Get me out." Her reply buzzed back, sharp and swift. "Power's going down in 10. Be ready." Marcus smirked, pain lancing through his chest, but his dark eyes burned with a fire no cell could snuff out. The precinct hummed with late-night routine, guards shuffling papers, radios crackling, the faint clink of keys echoing down the hall. Outside, the city pulsed with protests, chants of "Free Marcus," shaking the streets sparked by Claire's livestream and the teenage girl's viral feed, now at 8 million views. Hank Grayson's setup, Judge Tate's bias, and the planted. Drugs had locked him here, a 10-year sentence looming, but Marcus wasn't done. Vickers's betrayal of the system, his tapes and logs, were his ace, and Lena's tech prowess was his hammer. He gripped the burner, his breath shallow, waiting for the chaos to break him free. 9 minutes ticked by, each second a nail in his ribs, then the lights flickered, a low buzz rippling through the cell block. The precinct's power grid groaned, Lena's team flooding it with a digital assault from Dallas, frying circuits with ruthless precision. Darkness slammed down, plunging the building into a void, alarms blaring as guards shouted, "What the hell?" Marcus stood, wincing, his body a map of bruises but his mind razor-sharp. The cell door's electronic lock clicked, sparking faintly as the system failed, and he shoved it open, the metal screeching against concrete. Freedom beckoned, but the fight was just starting. He slipped into the hall, shadows swallowing his steps, the burner's light guiding him past empty cells and scrambling guards. Vickers emerged from a side corridor, his burly frame tense, his uniform badge glinting in the dark. "This way," he whispered, tossing Marcus a keyring snatched from the desk. "Back exit's clear." Marcus nodded, pain flaring as he moved, his ribs grinding with every step. Sirens wailed outside, red and blue flashing through barred windows. The precinct a beehive kicked over. They hit a stairwell, descending fast, Vickers's boots thudding behind, his voice low. "Tate's tapes are with your team." Hank screwed. The back door loomed, a rusted slab of steel, and Marcus jammed the key in, twisting hard. It swung open, spilling them into an alley, the night air thick with humidity and the distant roar of protesters. Freedom hit like a jolt, but it shattered fast. Headlights blazed from the shadows, a black van screeching to a halt, tires smoking on wet asphalt. 3 goons piled out, hired muscle in leather jackets, their faces hard with purpose. Hank's doing, no doubt, his oil money buying one last hit. The leader, a slab of a man with a scar across his cheek, swung a bat, his growl feral. "End of the line, Reynolds." Marcus dodged, the bat whistling past his head, splintering a dumpster's edge as he stumbled, his ribs a furnace of pain. Vickers lunged, tackling a second goon, a wiry guy with a knife, their grunts echoing as they hit the ground. The third, a bald thug with brass knuckles, charged Marcus, landing a blow to his left arm, the crack of bone sharp and sickening. Pain exploded, his arm hanging limp, but he pivoted, driving his good elbow into the thug's jaw, dropping him with a thud. The scar-faced leader swung again, catching Marcus's shoulder, the impact wrenching a gasp as he fell, blood pooling from his lip. Vickers wrestled free, slamming the wiry goon's head into the pavement, then tackled the leader, his bulk pinning the bat mid-swing. "Go!" he shouted, his voice raw as he grappled, giving Marcus a window. But the alley wasn't empty. Protesters surged in from the street, drawn by the sirens, their signs flashing, "Justice for Marcus," in the dark. A young woman with dread spotted him, yelling, "He's here!" And the crowd swarmed, a human shield between Marcus and the goons. Fists flew, shouts rose, the protesters clashing with Hank's muscle as cop lights flared closer. Marcus staggered up, his broken arm cradled, blood dripping onto the asphalt, his vision swimming but his will iron. The protesters held the line, a wall of fury and hope, some filming, others swinging at the goons. Vickers broke free, his uniform torn, his face bloodied but fierce. "I've got more," he rasped, pulling a USB from his pocket, thrusting it at Marcus. "Apex's dirty deals, Hank's just the start." Marcus took it, the drive a grenade in his hand, his smirk faint, despite the agony. "You're one of us now," he said, his voice a gravelly promise. Sirens screamed nearer, cop cars screeching into the alley, lights blinding as officers poured out, batons raised. The protesters roared, "Protect him!" shielding Marcus as Vickers stood firm, his badge a shield of defiance. "I'm with him," Vickers barked at the cops, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Hank paid Tate. Check the tapes." The lead cop hesitated, his baton lowering, the crowd's fury a wall he couldn't breach. Marcus leaned against a wall, his broken arm throbbing, his ribs of ice, but his dark eyes locked on the scene, the USB burning in his grip. In Dallas, Lena watched the precinct's hacked feeds, her team cheering as Marcus broke free, the protesters' clash hitting every screen. Claire's livestream spiked to 10 million, her voice a battle cry. "He's out! They're fighting for him!" The teenage girl's feed matched it, tears gone, her narration fierce. "He's not giving up." Apex's stock cratered. 50% down, the board in freefall as Grayson screamed into phones, his empire ash. Hank, in his cab across town, saw the news flash, his whiskey spilling as he snarled, "Get him back!" His next hit already brewing. Marcus coughed, blood flecking his chin, the alley a war zone of flashing lights and swinging fists. The protesters held, a tide of rage against Hank's goons, Vickers a rock beside him, his whistleblower truth a blade to cut deeper. He'd escaped, but at a cost, his body broken, his fight far from over. The cops wavered, the USB a ticking bomb, and Marcus stood tall, battered but unbowed, the night alive with the sound of justice clawing free. Hank's trap had sprung, but Marcus had slipped it, and now the real reckoning loomed. The downtown Austin courthouse stood like a granite fortress against the night sky, its marble steps slick with rain, the air buzzing with the hum of media vans and the shouts of protesters spilling from the streets. Marcus Reynolds staggered through the back entrance, his broken arm cradled in a makeshift sling from Vickers' torn shirt, his ribs grinding with every step, blood soaking his shredded suit. Lena Carter flanked him, her blazer sharp despite the chaos, her dark eyes fierce as she guided him past flashing cameras into a service elevator. Vickers trailed, his uniform bloodied, the USB of Apex's dirty secrets clutched tight, his burly frame a shield against the frenzy. The elevator jolted upward, the hum a brief reprieve, but Marcus's smirk stayed, faint and lethal, his body battered, but his will a steel core. The boardroom on the 5th floor was a war zone of its own. Apex's emergency meeting already underway, the long oak table ringed by panicked executives in rumpled suits. Chairman Victor Grayson pounded the table, his silver hair wild, his voice hoarse. "He's killing us. Stock's at 60% down." Screens flickered with news feeds. Claire's livestream at 12 million, the teenage girls at 10. Hank's bribe to Tate blasting everywhere. Marcus crashed the scene via a wall-mounted video screen, Lena patching him in from her tablet, his bloodied face filling the frame as gasps rippled through the room. "You're done," he rasped, his voice gravelly but iron. "Hank's out. Tate's next." Grayson's face purpled, but before he could retort, Marcus nodded to Vickers, who stepped forward, plugging the USB into Lena's device. The audio erupted, Hank's slurred voice clear. "Frame him good, Harlan. Drugs'll bury him." Tate's rasp followed. 10 years minimum. Then came Apex's dirt. Years of hushed-up bias complaints, payoffs to silence victims, all laid bare. The board froze, jaws dropping as Grayson stammered, "This is fake." Lena cut in, her voice ablade. "Authenticated by our team. You're complicit." Marcus leaned closer to the screen, blood dripping from his chin, his dark eyes piercing. "Expel Hank. Now, or I sink this whole ship." The room erupted, executives shouting, some scrambling for phones, others slumping in defeat. Grayson's hands shook, but he nodded, barking, "Vote!" Hands shot up, unanimous. Hank's contracts severed in a heartbeat, his oil empire cut from Apex's lifeline. Marcus's smirk widened, pain lancing through his ribs, but victory tasted sharp. He'd turned their own filth against them, Vickers's whistleblower gold a dagger in their gut. Lena typed fast, streaming the vote to Claire, who blasted it live. "Hank's out! Marcus wins!" The teenage girl's feed echoed it, her voice a cheer. "They're listening!" But Hank wasn't done. He'd slipped into the courthouse minutes earlier, his Stetson low, his whiskey breath sour as he stormed the hall outside the boardroom, a snub-nosed revolver tucked in his coat. He'd seen the news in his cab, Victor's betrayal flashing, his empire crumbling, and rage boiled over, a lifetime of privilege denied its due. He shoved past a security guard, his meaty hand slamming the boardroom door open, the gun gleaming as he roared, "You don't cut me, Reynolds!" Eyes locked on the screen, he fired, the shot deafening, shattering the glass as executives screamed, diving under the table. The bullet missed the screen, but fate turned crueler. Lena, standing beside Marcus, took the hit, the slug ripping through her chest, blood blooming on her blazer as she crumpled, her tablet clattering to the floor. Marcus lunged, catching her, his broken arm useless, his ribs howling as he sank with her, blood pooling hot and fast. "Lena!" he shouted, his voice breaking, her breath shallow, her dark eyes fading. Hank spun, gun raised for another shot, but Vickers tackled him, his bulk slamming the tycoon to the ground, the revolver skidding across the marble. "Stay down!" Vickers bellowed, pinning him, blood from his own wounds mixing with Lena's. The boardroom dissolved into chaos, executives fleeing, Grayson cowering as security swarmed, cuffing Hank, his Stetson crushed underfoot. Marcus cradled Lena, her pulse weak, his good hand pressing her wound, blood seeping through his fingers. "Hold on," he rasped, tears cutting through the grime on his face, but her lips moved faint and final. "You're CEO now," she whispered, her voice a thread. "Fix it." Her eyes closed, her body still, and Marcus's roar of grief shook the room, raw and primal. The woman who'd built Apex with him gone in a heartbeat. Protesters outside surged closer, their chants a thunderous wave. "Justice for Marcus! End Apex corruption!" Claire's livestream caught the shot, her voice cracking. "They killed her! Hank shot her!" The feed hit 15 million, the teenage girl syncing it, sobbing. She was helping him. News vans screeched into the lot, reporters shouting. As the story exploded, Apex's stock a ghost, 70% down, the company a husk. Hank thrashed in cuffs, snarling, "I'll get you, Reynolds." But his power was ash, his last swing a death knell. Marcus collapsed beside Lena, blood pooling around them, his broken arm limp, his ribs a furnace, his spirit teetering on the edge. Vickers knelt nearby, his face grim, the USB still streaming Apex's sins to the world. Security dragged Hank out, his shouts fading, but Marcus barely heard, his world narrowing to Lena's still form, her dying words a crown he hadn't wanted. CEO. He'd fought for control, not this, not her life. The room spun, pain and loss crashing over him, but his dark eyes flickered, a spark of steel holding fast. In Dallas, the board watched in horror, Grayson's phone slipping from his hand as Lena's blood stained their screens, Marcus's grief a mirror to their ruin. The vote had cut Hank, but her death cut deeper, Apex's legacy a graveyard now. Protesters breached the courthouse doors, their fury a tide, and Marcus lay there, battered beyond measure, the USB's truth his last weapon. He'd won the board, lost his sister in arms, and Hank's bullet had shifted everything. The night, pulsed with chaos, his blood mixing with hers, and the reckoning wasn't over yet. The hospital room at St. David's Medical Center in Austin was a sterile cocoon, its white walls bathed in the soft glow of dawn filtering through blinds, the beep of monitors a steady pulse in the quiet. Marcus Reynolds lay in a bed, his broken arm in a cast, his ribs wrapped tight, bandages crisscrossing his bruised frame. Tubes snaked from his wrist, pumping fluids to mend a body battered by Karen's extinguisher, Hank's goons, and a night of unrelenting war. Blood still crusted his lip, but his dark eyes flickered open, sharp and unbroken. The pain a dull roar beneath a will forged in fire. The USB from Vickers rested on the bedside table, its secrets now a global blaze. Apex's stock a memory at 80% down. Outside, the world churned with the fallout. News vans clogged the parking lot, reporters shouting over each other as headlines screamed, "Hank Grayson arrested for murder. Judge Tate indicted for corruption." Claire's live stream had hit 20 million, her voice a steady drumbeat of justice, while the teenage girl's feed synced it, her tears dry, her narration a rallying cry. Protesters filled the streets, their signs a forest of fury. Marcus won. Apex reborn. Lena's death had lit the match, her blood. On the courthouse floor, a price Marcus carried in his chest, heavier than the cast on his arm. Her last words, "You're CEO now," echoed, a crown he'd never sought but couldn't shed. He shifted, wincing as his ribs protested, his good hand brushing the USB, its weight a testament to Vickers's stand. The guard had vanished after the courthouse, his tapes and logs handed to Lena's team before Hank's bullet struck, his whistleblower truth dismantling Apex's rot. By midday, news broke. Hank faced life for Lena's murder. Tate's bench was stripped, his bribes exposed, and Apex's board was gutted, half fired by Marcus's first act as CEO, texted from the stretcher as medics wheeled him out. "Clean house," he'd written, and Lena's team obeyed, their loyalty to her memory a steel thread holding the company together. The door creaked open, a nurse slipping in, her scrubs crisp, her face calm as she checked his chart. "You're stable, Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice soft. "But rest. You've been through hell." Marcus nodded, his smirk faint, his voice a rasp. "Hell's my old neighborhood. I'm good." She smiled, adjusting his IV, then left, the door clicking shut. He exhaled, the quiet a balm after days of chaos, his mind ticking through Apex's rebirth. Stock was climbing, 10% up since dawn, investors betting on his iron grip, his vow to dismantle bias ringing across every outlet. "This airline's mine, and it'll never forget." But the quiet shattered fast. The door burst open, again, Karen Holt charging in, her blonde hair wild, her uniform swapped for a gray hoodie, a kitchen knife gleaming in her hand. Out on bail, slipped through a clerical glitch, her eyes burned with a madness that hadn't died in cuffs. "You ruined me!" she shrieked, her voice a jagged edge, her steps wild as she lunged, the blade slashing for his throat. Marcus rolled, pain exploding in his ribs, his casted arm useless as he caught her wrist with his good hand, the knife inches from his neck. "You ruined yourself," he grunted, twisting hard, her grip faltering as the blade clattered to the floor. She screamed, clawing at him, her nails raking his face, but he shoved her back, his strength a flicker of what it was, enough to send her crashing into the IV stand. Alarms blared, monitors toppling as she scrambled up, her breath ragged, her hate a living thing. "I'll kill you," she spat, diving for the knife. But the door flew open, 2 cops storming in, their guns drawn. "Freeze!" one barked, tackling her as she thrashed, her hoodie ripping, her sobs a broken wail. "He took everything," she cried, but the cuffs snapped shut, her fight bleeding out as they dragged her away, her final swing a miss. Marcus sank back, blood trickling from fresh scratches, his chest heaving, the cops' radios crackling as they hauled Karen out. "She's done," the second cop muttered, nodding to Marcus, respect in his eyes. The room settled, the alarm silenced, nurses rushing in to reset the chaos, their hands steady as they patched him up again. He waved them off, his smirk returning, faint but fierce. "I'm fine," he rasped, his gaze drifting to the window, Austin's skyline a hazy promise beyond the glass. Karen's last gasp had failed, her knife no match for his resolve, and now she'd rot, her hate her prison. By noon, the news hit. Karen Holt rearrested in hospital attack. Claire's stream caught it live, her voice triumphant. "He's unstoppable." The teenage girl's feed synced, her narration a cheer. "She's gone for good." Apex's stock ticked up 20% now, Marcus's vow echoing in boardrooms and streets. He fired the rest of the old guard via text, his legal team purging the company's rot, new hires vetted for fairness, a hotline launched for passengers to report bias, all under his iron fist. Lena's death fueled it, her blood a pact he'd never break, her vision his now. He sat up, pain a dull roar, his good hand tracing the USB, Vickers's gift a cornerstone of this new apex. The nurse returned, her eyes wide. "You're trending everywhere, Mr. Reynolds. Stocks climbing. They're calling you a legend." He chuckled, a dry sound, his voice steady despite the ache. "Legends bleed too. Tell him I'm just getting started." She nodded, leaving. Him to the quiet, the dawn brightening, the city alive with his name. He'd turned Karen's hate, Hank's bullets, Tate's gavel into ash, and built something stronger on the ruins. Marcus leaned back, his gaze fixed on the skyline. Houston's silhouette faint in his mind, the storm that started this fading into memory. He'd boarded a plane a businessman, fought as a warrior, and emerged a king, apex his throne, its rules rewritten in his blood and Lena's. Karen's knife was her last mistake. Hank's shot his undoing, and Tate's bench a relic of a world Marcus had shattered. The hospital hummed around him, the world watching, and he whispered to the empty room, "This airline's mine, and it'll never forget." The fight was over, but his reign was just beginning, a promise carved in the sky for all to see. Marcus Reynolds' journey in this gripping tale offers raw, unfiltered lessons about resilience, systemic bias, and the power of truth. First, it shows that racism isn't just loud slurs, it's the quiet assumptions, like Karen Holt's snap judgment that Marcus didn't belong in first class, escalating into violence and corruption. His story proves that prejudice thrives in systems, from flight crews to crooked judges, but it can be dismantled with cunning and courage. Marcus didn't just endure. He turned every attack, coffee burns, glass cuts, a mob's fists, even a bullet, into leverage, exposing Apex's rot and forcing change. Second, allies matter. Lena's loyalty, Vickers's whistleblowing, and the protesters' roar turned Marcus's solo fight into a movement. It's a reminder that justice isn't won alone. It's built with those who see the truth and act. Third, power isn't given, it's taken. Marcus claimed his CEO throne not by begging, but by breaking the old guard, proving that real change demands sacrifice, like Lena's life and relentless will. Finally, the story screams that silence isn't an option. Marcus hacked intercoms, sparked live streams, and wielded evidence to flip the narrative. Speak up, fight back, and the world listens. For every Karen or Hank, there's a Marcus who can rise battered but unbowed, turning pain into progress. So, what's your takeaway? How far would you go to right a wrong like Marcus did? Drop a comment with your thoughts, hit like if this fired you up, and subscribe for more tales of grit and justice. Share this if you believe in standing tall against bias. Thanks for riding this wild journey with us. Here's to building a world where no one's grounded by hate. Stay fierce, stay fearless.